There are thousands of possibilities, aren't there? But the main ones are probably, when you're dead, that's it, kaput. Reincarnation, which is particularly seen in Buddhism and Hinduism. I think it's fair to say that Buddhism is, in a sense, a different sort of, it's a sort of reformed Hinduism in a sense, but the basic structure of the universe is similar. And then you've got the views that some sort of a judgment after heaven, hell, sort of stuff. I take funerals as an Anglican minister, not as many in the job I'm doing now, which is a relief. But just off the record, I don't say this at funerals, one of the things I find really difficult to cope with, I find funerals generally difficult to cope with, but the game that gets played that everyone's gone to heaven. In fact, when I was a young minister, fresh out of college, the guy I was being trained with said, Ian, no matter what, never go in the hearse, in the family hearse. Even if you have to catch a taxi, just don't ever go in the family hearse. I said, why not? He says, because at some stage someone will turn to you and say, John, my husband, Dad, Uncle Bruce, whoever it is, he's in heaven now, isn't he? Everyone looks at you. And the only answer you can give is yes. In the social dynamic. Any other answer is the wrong answer and defensive. And so Jim said to me, don't do that, because you'll find yourself put in an impossible situation. And often everything you know about the person indicates that they're probably not. Not that I'm their judge, but that there's no indication that... but we all play this game that everyone goes to heaven. I've joked with friends, how come only good people die? Everyone who dies, when you talk to the family, oh, he was a great guy, fantastic husband, and we bless him again. No bad people seem to die. Well, I did do one of my first funerals. I gave this really nice eulogy about this guy. I came outside and there was a guy smoking. It was just sort of at the door. I said, oh, hi. Did you know the guy who died? He said, yeah, he's my stepfather. I said, really? I said, well, what was he like? He said, it sounded like a nice guy. He said, an utter bastard. I'm going to be more careful. So I then began to say, I have been told he is. I was told he was like this. You can end up accidentally telling falsehoods. Now the problem you see with this whole thing is, we don't really know. There are lots of genuine opinions, and whatever opinion you have about life after death, you need to face the fact that there are literally billions of people who disagree with you. And I mean, I'm not just, that's not preacher's rhetoric. There are billions of people who flat disagree with you. And many of them are smarter than you. Many of them are more stupid than you. That's just the way it is with any point of view. One of the questions we could discuss, but just for the sake of everyone, is to think, it's interesting to ask people, if ever someone tells you what they think is what happens after death, ask them nicely, on what sort of evidence have you got that that's true? What do you base that on? So you can have all sorts of theories about what's in my pocket, but you've got no evidence, have you? You can be the smartest people in the universe. You can get together the greatest brains in the world who specialise in pockets and what 58-year-old men put in their pockets and all this sort of nonsense. It's not going to do you much good because you're ignorant. Right? You just don't know. So the only honest position is agnosticism. Yeah.
There is one person that went to heaven and came back to tell us, Jesus Christ.
Well, that's the Christian. The Christians have got a peculiar argument about Jesus, which we'll come to. You may have met people, because I've met people who have died for a little bit. When I did the St. John's ambulances course, is called clinical death, as against biological death. Clinical death, when you stop breathing, you've got about 3 or 4 minutes before you begin to fall into biological death, when your brain dies. That's when you're really dead. When you just stop breathing, you're very close to death, and someone better do something quickly. So Kerry Packer, famously, the wealthy Australian, well, he's dead, so he's not very wealthy now, but the once wealthy Australian, he was playing polo, and he had a heart attack. I would have thought all should have had a heart attack, but he had the heart attack, fell off. Thankfully for him, the ambulance that came in Sydney, Warwick Farm, was one of the few ambulances we had that had those things you whack them on your chest and they bring and up he came. And so he, as a mark of thankfulness, and very publicly, as a lot of his not all, but a lot of his gifts were done quite publicly. He gave to all the ambulances in New South Wales. Right, now he then was quite famously, and I've had a lot of my atheist friends quote this back at me. He said, Kerry Packer said, I've been dead, there was nothing there was no light, there was no God, there was no judgment. Right? And people think, there you go. And I've met people who've had after-death experiences who have met God and whose lives have been changed by it. I just don't think either is actually really good evidence. You know, like we just don't know what's going on. With Kerry Packer, I think it's a bit like someone saying, you got a picture of Sydney, I don't know if you know Sydney, it faces east, we've got beaches there, Bondi and others. It's like someone swimming out 200 metres out from Bondi, coming back and saying, there's no New Zealand. I've been out there, I've swum, you swum that far out? No, I've swum 200 flipping metres out there, there's no New Zealand, it's a rotten myth. I don't know where those weird people come from, but there's nothing out there. And I want to say to them, keep swimming. It's out there, and turn a little south. Keep going. See, Kerry Packer wasn't dead. He was only very close. He was playing on the edge. He was clinically dead, but not biologically. If he'd been dead for an hour or two, or 3 days, something like that, then I would have been interested to hear what he had to say. But here's the thing that he never quoted, and I was always delighted to share this with my atheist friends. He rang up Australia's most prominent atheist back then, called Philip Adams. And we had Philip Adams for a debate at Sydney University once, and Philip was chortling about this. Packer rang him up. They had property next to each other up in Hunter Valley. Kerry Packer rang him up and said, Philip, I've been dead. He said, I'll leave out the swear words. He said, there was no blankety-blank light, there was no blankety-blank God, there was no blankety-blank judgment. Which means, this is the crucial part, we can blankety-blankety-blank do whatever we damn well like. I see, when people say to people who believe in life after death, you just believe that to make yourself feel good, believing not, the choice to believe there's no life after death is just as psychologically convenient. It's just a question of who uses that stick first. So don't get bluffed on either side by this. The question is, who's got the evidence? Where is the evidence? See now, when I became a Christian, just after I left high school, soon after that I finished up being a youth worker, and in God's irony, I was sent into high schools to try and convert young heathen Sydney-siders, which is what I wanted to do. But I noticed that after about a year, I got asked the same. The most frequently asked question I got was, I would say something like this: when you die, you're going to meet God face to face. Someone would rock back on their chair. It's a reasonably tough little school. They'd say, how do you know? And then I'd say, well, I'd often say, well, how do you know that isn't the case? What do you think happens? When you're dead, you're dead. Food for worms. I'd say, how do you know? If you ask a man a question he doesn't have an answer for, he normally just talks louder. So they'd say, well, how do you know it's wrong? I said, I'll tell you why I know it's wrong. I want you firstly to tell us why you know it's right. You've made an assertion, you know, as if you know something. Tell us. A learned one. On what do you base that opinion? Well, they don't have any basis, really. You can examine the body. No one is suggesting that the body is going to tell you what's happening. Human beings aren't quite that stupid. They think you can tell that. Everyone agrees when the person dies, the body decays, etc., etc. But that was the question, and I want to use a big word for those who like big words. The only big word for the night, I think. Epistemology. Okay, it's one of the 3 or 4 big areas that you study in philosophy, and it's the study of knowledge. How do you know what you know? And how do you know that you know what you think you know? It's a very important area. How do you know anything? And there are different ways that you access knowledge. The way that you know a person is different to the way that you know granite. The way that you access knowledge about history is different to the way that you access knowledge about the atom. Some dopes don't realise this. So some very fine scientists who are very good in their particular area of discipline speak as if the whole world can be explored just using the methodology of science. And that just means that they actually need to do more thinking and reading. because science is a magnificent, powerful tool that the Christians invented, and it's very powerful at a few magnificent areas. We're all the better off for it. But it won't help you know if your girlfriend loves you, right? And things like that. It won't even help you work out if your mother loves you. So the question of how do you know stuff? See, what you have is our problem. Here's our fundamental problem with this question of life after death. There's thousands of opinions, 3 or 4 main opinions that we call the great religions of the world. Right? There's thousands of opinions held by very clever people and very stupid people. But they're just opinions. They're not facts. There's many ideas sincerely held. But there's precious little evidence. There's precious little evidence that is checkable, outable. Right? People have personal experiences, like near-death experiences, they're called, when a person gets very close to death. But people come back with such different reports. There's certain things that are similar about them. I've read some very fine philosophers, not Christians, but who find the cumulative evidence from many cultures, what happens in some of those near-death experiences, convincing evidence of something. I don't, frankly. They may be right. I just don't want to hang any evidence on that. Lots of theories, very little knowledge. Like what's in my pocket. You just don't know. And this is another thing the Bible's unaware of. So let me show you one of my favourite verses. I'm never going to write a book, I don't think, but if ever I was going to write a book, the first chapter would be about this verse. It's in John chapter 1, verse 18. No one has ever seen God. No one has ever seen God. And in the original language, it means exactly what that says, but it's slightly stronger. It's basically this: no one has seen God ever. And here's the problem. See, when it comes to the question of God and all the ultimate questions, we don't know. We have not seen. We don't have good evidence. Let me draw you a diagram that I find helpful. If you don't find helpful, I'm sorry to waste your time, but somebody might. Here is a little diagram. Here's where you live. I'll put you here. There you are. And you're happy. Because it's Wednesday night and you're what are we at? Cross Culture, whatever. No, you're here. So you're happy. I'm back up here somewhere. And I'm really happy because I'm in the Paris of the South. But I'm much closer. So what these points here, so this is birth, death. That's where you live. That's where we live. Or if it's more poetic, the womb to the tomb. That's where you live. Now, because you're busy and because there's lots of distractions and fun and pleasure and blah, 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 you can often get through life barely thinking about any serious question. But every now and then human beings things happen. It can be an experience of extreme beauty. It can be just a thought that comes into your head from nowhere. It can be something that comes to you listening to music. It can be something that you think about at a funeral. At some point or other, almost every human, I think, starts to ask some ultimate questions. Big questions. Questions like the one we're looking at tonight. What on earth is out here? Because the way it works is, we had this in, that's this. Birth, death. Whatever's on the other side, it goes on. You're going to be a long time dead. Right? Thousands, millions, billions, forever. This life is very important. The Bible never, Jesus, the guy I follow, Jesus never suggests this life is unimportant. But it's short. And you've got to see it in perspective. Right? This is an important question, but we just don't know. I think if you stop and ask the question, not does my culture have an idea, does my family have an idea, there's some program I saw on some documentary channel, which is a great way to learn about the universe. Does it have a view? But we just don't know. And you can ask questions about God, and these questions are linked up because if there is some afterlife and there is a God, these things will obviously be interplaying together. We ask, what is God like? Again, if we're honest, we just don't know. There might be many, it might be she, it might be he, it might be an it. You can have the stupidest of all ideas. Sorry, I shouldn't say that. We're going to nice way to say that. Because you might think it. One of the silliest things I've ever heard that is common where I come from is people talk about, oh, God's not a person. He, she, whatever. It's a force. It's a loving force. Really, a loving force. How does that work? How can you have loving electricity? Or, you know, a loving current in the ocean, or a loving tidal wave. Like, it's stupid. It's just nonsensical to put the word loving next to the word force. People are desperate to avoid God being a person because you've got to deal with the person. That's why many of us would rather have our best friend being a dog, because there's so much. And I get it, because dogs are gorgeous, you know, and they're much more consistent than humans. But you know, it's sad in the end. Better than nothing. But a loving, we don't want to deal with a person, because you know, persons are demanding, and you might have to answer to them. But so think of God as a force, then we would love Him in front of, because we're influenced by Jesus in the end, whether we like it or not. Well, we ask the question, what about me? What am I? Am I just a wet computer? Is that all I am really? Is that the best definition of me? Everything in me is just a question of chemicals. I think I fall in love, but that's really just a bunch of chemicals. And if you're a consistent atheist, it's very, very difficult to avoid that conclusion. Atheists I've read desperately try to avoid the fact that in the end, what you really are is a bunch of chemical processes. You think you love someone, it's really just chemicals in the brain. We'll unpack it in the end. Everything is reduced to chemicals. That's okay. That's the way it is. That's the way it is. But what is it just a question of handing on my DNA? In which case, I might as well die and get out of the way. I've got 3 beautiful children. I'm just taking up oxygen. Right? I've done the job. I've reproduced. Get out of the way. Or are we something else? So we actually don't have answers to any of these questions, and often you don't care. But then every now and then something will come and you'll suddenly become a serious human being and you think, what is this all about? And if you ask that question at the dinner party, normally people try to change the subject. They'll give you a bit of a joke, have another drink. Right? Please don't be serious. Socrates, great Greek thinker, sometime before Jesus, in the end was put to death for asking too many questions. Well, as far as we can tell from history. He went and talked to all the religious leaders of his town and worked out that by asking questions that they actually knew very little, actually knew nothing really. And when you pushed them and asked them questions. And he finished up with a conclusion like this. He said, we must wait until a God comes from the gods or a man is sent from the gods to tell us of the gods. We actually just don't know. And there are some times when it's much better to say, I don't know, than to pretend you know something. Agnosticism, as that's called. You just go, I don't know. That's much better than saying, this is what I think. If what you think is actually worth nothing, or has got no validity, it's better to say, I haven't got any real idea, I'm just waiting for more information. So there's our problem, folks. So when it comes to this question, we honestly just don't know. So people tend to say stuff that just makes people feel better. Right? That's what people do at funerals. They just say stuff that makes people feel better. And I get that. That's loving your neighbour. But in the end, that's dangerous. Because whatever's on the other side of death does not change because you believe in it or not. Right? If in the end there's nothing on the other side, that you believe there's a heaven and a hell or reincarnation doesn't change what's going to be there. Right? Reality is the thing that hits you even when you're not aware it's there. Right? Every now and then you hear sad stories of wonderful, good nurses who accidentally give the wrong tablet to the wrong patient and the patient dies. The intention and sincerity is fundamentally irrelevant. There are certain things that are true and certain things that are false. Now I understand that attitude changes things. But in the big questions, we need to know what's out here, but we can't know what's out here. So that's what the Bible says here. No one has ever seen God. See, in all the big questions, no one's qualified to speak. Jesus says in John 6, very similar thing. No one has seen the Father. This is the problem. See, no one has seen. No one's qualified to speak about God, who would seem to be the only one who can really tell us about this. Therefore, in all the ultimate questions, we haven't got an answer. You know, we can work out E equals mc squared, although I don't think most people have the faintest of what that actually means. But we can drop all these bits of knowledge that we have, but we can't tell. Basically, because no one's ever seen God. People have asked to see God. Moses asked if he could see God. I don't know if you know anything of the Bible. Moses, one of God's really good friends, he'd seen God act magnificently in ways that shocked and pleased Moses. In the end, he said, I just want to see your glory. And you might remember God's answer, Moses, I can't. No one can see me and live. If God was to turn up in this room, right, as he is, you would not get to go home and write the final work on what God is like. Right? You would cease to be. Right? The sun, it's 93 million miles away. If it turned up in this room, you wouldn't write the final book on what the sun's doing. Right? Because it's just too powerful. If God, and the sun is nothing. God has made billions of stars bigger than the sun. So no one's ever seen God. The Bible's aware of the problem. It wants people to face everything. Any questions on this before we move on? Yeah?
Jesus said, who have seen me, have seen God.
Did he? Yes. That's a big claim. He might be right.
He's totally right.
We'll come back to that. Can you think of anyone else in history who's made that sort of claim? If you have seen me, you have seen God. I can't. There is no way that Muhammad would make that statement. In fact, I think if Jesus made that statement in the presence of Muhammad, Muhammad would have killed him. It's blasphemous, isn't it? It's a disgraceful comment to make, really, at one level. If you want to know what God is like, look at me. Really? I mean, who do you think you are to say that? I mean, sometimes if you've been going to church for some time, you can not get... That is an extraordinary statement to make. Particularly for a Jew. Not so much for a Greek, and not so much for certain sorts of Hindus. Hinduism's a funny word, because it really... It's an English invention for the religion. And I'm not saying the religion. When the English got to India, they found this extraordinarily complicated religion, and they put a name over the whole thing, and they called it Hinduism. And it's questionable if there is such a thing, really. But in much of the religion of India, to say that, the gods walk amongst us, it's like the Greeks. But if you're a Jew, at this point, like a Muslim or like a Christian, you've got this view of God as there's one God, he's the maker of everything, he's transcendent above everything, he's other than us. For a Jew, like Jesus, to say, if you've seen me, you've seen God. It's hard for us to get the size of that statement. The Jews were either right to kill him, or that small group of Jews who worshipped him were right to worship him. But any other position doesn't understand what he's saying. All right. Well, let's have a look at because I've only read part of the verse for you. We're here. John 1:18. No one has ever seen God. John 6. Jesus speaking says this: no one has seen the Father except. Now that's interesting. Jesus saying universal ignorance. No one knows. No one has seen. No one is qualified. Lots of opinions. None of them worth anything. Not that anyone has seen the Father except, okay, Jesus thinks there's an exception, except the one. Now Jesus thinks there's one exception. No one has seen the Father except the one who is from God. Only he has seen the Father. Moses couldn't see the Father. Jesus is saying there's a guy that the Father has sent. And if you read through John's Gospel, the most common phrase Jesus uses to describe himself is that he was sent from the Father. He's the original missionary. That means to be sent. So this is Jesus talking about himself. He often speaks of himself in the third person. Like he used that phrase, the Son of Man. So Jesus says there is one exception. See, we're all in the dark. One exception. John 1:18, to go back to that verse. No one has ever seen God, but God, the only begotten God, it's a very strange phrase that in the original, but the only begotten God, which is that's a weird way to speak. So translators have trouble trying to translate it. They should probably just translate it literally. Okay? But the only begotten God, who is at the Father's side, he has revealed it. He has made him known. So what John 1:18 and John 6 are the same thing. Total lack of qualification. No matter how clever you are, how many degrees you've done, how much years you've gone studying the great religions of the world, etc., nobody knows what happens after death. Nobody knows what God is like. Nobody knows what the purpose of being human is. Although we can probably get some hunches towards that more than the other two. Jesus, there is one exception. And it's me, he says. It is an extraordinary claim Jesus makes. It's similar to what Jesus says in John 8. To use a slightly different but related image, Jesus says this in John 8 verse 12. Jesus spoke to the people, he said, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness but will have the light of life. The Pharisees challenged him, saying, here you are appearing as your own witness, your testimony is not valid. We'll have a big argument. By the end of the chapter they try to kill him. Right? But hear what Jesus says. He does not say, I am a light in the world. I think most Australians could put up with that. He is one of many lights. Buddha, Muhammad, Confucius, Zoroaster, etc., etc. Jesus doesn't say that. He says, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. The assumption is we are in the dark. He says, I've come as light in the world. I'm the light. And we really need to see that on the background of our obvious problem, if we're hard-headed about it, we don't know what's on the other side. We know we're going to be there for a long time. And frankly, those of you who are young, which is not me, a certain percentage of you will get there in hell of a hurry. Because young people die by accident. But old people like me, we tend to die by cancer. We get a chance to warm up and go to a side. But young people, they tend to get there quickly. Every now and then it catches you on the hop, so to speak, unexpected. But what Jesus is saying is, I am the qualified one. I know the Father. I've seen the Father. In fact, John 1 begins with this statement about Jesus. Using the word for Jesus, one of the many titles, the Word. In the beginning was the Word. The Word was with God. When was the Word with God? At the beginning. So when the beginning was, there was God with the Word. So they were there before the beginning. You got that? It's brain. It gives you a headache and stuff. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. So that there's God and this being called the Word with there together. And the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. There was never a time when God was on his own. God is always, he is they, basically what it's saying. From the very beginning. He's an expert on God. And when it says he was with God, the word actually means he was leaning towards. It's a word of intimacy. Now this being called the Word was leaning in towards God. That there was this lovely, a bit like, I don't want to trivialise it, a bit like you see a couple who are in love. They sort of lean in as they walk together. It's that sort of picture. He's an expert on God. He's an expert on, look, verse 3, through him all things were made, without him nothing was made that has been made. So to say, through Jesus, through the Word, everything was made. The sun that we mentioned, the earth, everything. All made by him. Nothing was made apart from him. So you will never see anything, no matter how far our telescopes get to the end of the universe. It's all, it's got the artist in it, made by Jesus. Right? If you like, the Father was the architect, the Son was the builder. And they worked in this collaborative way. In him was life, and the life was the light of all people. This is the one who became flesh. Right? This is the only begotten God. And he has come and made him known. He's exposed God. You can know what God is like. You can know what God's going to do with you after life and after death. Right? That's the claim. Now, we've already established the fact that you're all ignoramuses about what's in my pocket. Except who? Who's the one qualified person? Mark! Now, you might look at him and say, seriously? Now, if you want to know what's in my pocket, I'm not going to tell you. If I offer you, I'm not going to offer you. You can just have the prize. Tell me how you can find out what's in my pocket. Ask Mark. Mark, what's in my pocket?
Gosh, it was so long ago. I don't know. It's a lighter and a set of headphones. Oh, cigarette lighter.
In the pocket of an Anglican minister? Are you serious?
That's it, yeah.
Oh, that's my cigarettes. Okay. That's hard to believe, really. The earphones make sense because I was on a plane this morning. That's possible. Cigarette lighter is very likely. Now, if you leave the building tonight and you turn to the person you're with and say, what do you think that idiot had in his pocket? If you say, I don't know, how can I possibly know? What are you saying about Mark? You're saying something about Mark, aren't you? What are you saying about Mark? He's not trustworthy. He's point blank told, what did you say it was again?
How do you know? You know me. Oh, sorry. Cigarette lighter and a set of headphones.
Yeah, so if you go out of the building, and I know you won't because you've got more important things to talk about, and say, what was in that goose's pocket? Your interesting question, displaying ignorance of what was in my pocket, is a statement about this man's integrity, isn't it? You are actually saying, this man's a liar. Or if he's not a liar, I can't trust him. You know what I mean? Like, you might be saying he's a liar, but you are saying, I can't really trust what he said. Right? And so, this gentleman here told us what Jesus said, in John 14. That the disciples had been with Jesus for 3 years. It's very much like what Moses said to God. It's been fantastic seeing all this stuff. I want to see you. And Philip says to Jesus, it's been really exciting, Jesus, but if we could just see the Father, then we would be satisfied. Okay, it's the ancient question. We want to see God, we want to see God. We don't want to do it by faith, we want to see Him. And then Jesus gives this and it is an extraordinary answer. Philip, I've been with you for so long and you don't know who I am. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. That is unthinkable for a Jewish person to make up, as John is a Jewish person. There is no parallel to that in human history. This rubbish people go on with about all the religions are the same. You can only say that if you've never studied any of them. Right? There's nothing like Jesus claiming anywhere in the world. Seeing me, seeing the Father. Elsewhere Jesus said, if you've heard me, you've heard the Father. Right? Jesus said to reject me is to reject the Father. If you don't worship me, you don't worship God, Jesus says. Very powerful, this alignment between him and the Father. Right? It's absolute. And then similarly, so in a sense, Jesus is God's audio visual. You want to watch God? Read the Gospels. And you can watch God go to a funeral. You can watch the few times Jesus gets angry and find out what makes Jesus angry. Consider sort of people who are the friends of Jesus and people who aren't. And it's shocking who are the friends and who aren't. Jesus actually says to the very, very good men and women of his day, and they were, the Pharisees were good, they died by the thousands to defend monotheism against the pagan Romans. These are good, sincere men. Jesus says the prostitutes and the tax collectors, these are not tax collectors in our culture, are good. We don't like them, but they're good. Right? Tax collectors then were people who'd sided with the Romans and betrayed their own people and sold their souls, because if you became a tax collector, you weren't allowed to go to the temple. So he picks prostitutes and tax collectors. He says, The prostitutes and the tax collectors are going to get into the kingdom of heaven before you guys. Kidding? I mean, Jesus, he is not saying, religious, devout, sincere, are we? Kick, you're in. No, he says, you're almost more liable to miss than anybody else. So you watch who Jesus is friends with, discover who God is friends with. Listen to what Jesus says. Or elsewhere, that one of the 2 or 3 times in history when God actually speaks from the heavens, you can actually hear his voice if you're in the right place at the right time. Happened on Mount Sinai. And you remember what happened when the people of Israel heard the voice of God? Do you remember what they did? They said, no more, no more. The voice of God shook them to the ground. They said, Moses, why don't you go and talk to God? And we'll stay here and you tell us what God says. So we have no idea who God is. We think, oh, it would be fun if God spoke to us. Yeah, fun it would not. Exhilarating it would be. But fun it would not be. So the people of Israel, they get a chance to hear God's voice. And you go. But one of the few times when God did it was, Jesus takes three of the sort of the inner circle of the disciples to go up this mountain, and for a moment in Mark 9, the brilliance that is Jesus shines through his humanity, and it's like he's just this shining brightness. The cloud descends, and Moses and Elijah come and speak to Jesus about his exodus that he's about to do. He's dead. Peter, lovely. I like Peter. Peter says, Peter did not know what to say, so he said. That's my sort of guy. No idea what to say, so he'll say something anyhow. And just hope it comes out okay. And Peter says, it's a good thing that we're here, Lord. Let us build a sanctuary for Moses, for Elijah, the greatest of the prophets, and for you. And remember, the Father's voice comes and it says this. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him. You know, what God is saying, don't get all excited about Moses. Don't get all excited about Elijah. This is my Son. My beloved Son. It's a very, very wonderful word of rich love and tenderness. This is my beloved Son. And there's a sense in what God is saying to Peter is, shut up and listen. Don't talk about building sacred sites for Moses. Right? This is my Son. This is this unique moment in history. You can actually hear the one person qualified to speak. Right? That's the central claim at the heart of Christianity. The only monotheist on the planet heard it and ultimately killed him for it. There was a small group within that group who worshipped him. But there was a very clear dividing of the road around the person of Jesus. They could not pretend he was just a prophet. That was not an option Jesus left open. People who say Jesus is just one of the prophets are people who know nothing about who Jesus is. Right? It's just not an option if you look at the man. The deeds of Jesus, the words of Jesus. Right? The people in his day a number of times tried to kill him because they knew what he was saying. And the people most likely to understand him are his contemporaries. Do you know what I mean? Like, if his fellow Jews hear him, at one point he says, why are you going to kill me? In John 5, and he says, what good work are you going to kill me? They said, for no good work, but because you are a man, make yourself out to be God. They knew exactly what he was saying. But that's another issue. We've done two things, there's one more to go. We've looked at the problem, the nature of the problem. There's 1,000 theories about an important issue. No one's qualified to speak. There is one man who comes, who claims to be uniquely qualified. He is the light, or he claims to be the light of the world. He knows what's going on here. And the scary thing when you read Jesus in Matthew 7 and Matthew 25 and John 5, he actually says, on the other side of death, the key experience you'll have is you'll meet Jesus as judge. And this is one of the other freaky things Jesus says. He says, basically, what will determine heaven or hell for you, which is what he clearly believes. He doesn't believe in reincarnation. I used to believe in reincarnation. I went from being an atheist to a sort of Hindu, Buddhist-y thing for a while. And then finally, when I saw who Jesus was in the end, I had to reluctantly agree that he was right. But what Jesus says is that he's the judge. And it will depend not on have you been a nice person. it'll depend on whether you know him or not. So he says in a number of the parables, he says, he speaks of, do I know you? He sends people off to hell and says, apart from me, you do evil, I never knew you. It's the relationship. So again, this is one of the many things that Jesus says that people can miss. But he actually says, your relationship with me is what will determine heaven or hell for you. Not have you been a nice person. Right? Funnily enough, if you get caught up with Jesus, you will become a nice person. At least you become a lot nicer person than you would have been without it. I'm still a pest, I know that. But if I hadn't become a Christian, I'd have been even worse. I'm a hard case that God's been working on for some years. But it's actually about him, and Jesus talks about heaven and hell, and I believe in hell. I don't like believing in hell. I'd rather there wasn't a hell. I've got people I love who seem to be in danger of it. I believe in hell for one reason only. Because he does. Here's how Christianity works. We're in the dark. Because God knows our situation and loves us, he sends his Son, Jesus. Becomes truly incarnated, becomes one of us. Doesn't float just above the ground. He really is born of a woman. Goes to the bathroom, sweats. Right? This is it's a very difficult thing to get. And I learned this actually from some of my Muslim friends in Sydney, that they get angry when they get angry when you talk about God becoming, and one of them said, thought it was disgusting that he should become flesh and be born from between the legs of a woman. He said, trying to draw attention to how visceral, bodily fluids and yucky stuff, that makes it being human. But it is extraordinary for what it's saying. And then what Jesus does is he talks. And when you start reading the Gospels, you realise the freaky thing I remember when I started it was how often he talks about himself. He's often, because he wants you to understand this, not because he gets a buzz out of it, because you need to know here's the light. So he talks about himself. It's a bit like, if this whole thing crashed and there was an earthquake here, it's like Christchurch, New Zealand, and we're all under here. But if someone comes down and says, look, I'm from the emergency services, blah, 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 blah. Why? He'd say, look, I am a doctor, I know what's going on, or I'm an engineer, something. He would talk about himself not because he wants you to go, oh, a doctor, how wonderful. But he's telling you about himself so that you'll know how to respond to him. So that you'll take him seriously. You'll let him direct the way out rather than listen to some clown. Right? So Jesus talks about himself. He talks about his Father. He talks about what happens out here. He talks about you. And he is the one. So I believe in heaven and hell. Christians, healthy, humble Christians believe in heaven and hell, not because we like the idea of heaven and hell, but because he does. If he is not the Son of God, well then, make up whatever you like about what happens after death. But the question really is he who he says he is? Or can you safely dismiss him as a liar? That's an interesting position to take, why he would make up that lie, which was only ever going to kill him. If he'd just spoken as a prophet, he could have got away with that. The Jews would have argued if he was really a prophet or not, but it was all this stuff. I must not go down that track because I'd like to give you some more of the evidence. But now, before I give the last point on this, do you want to ask any questions? Because if it's not clear to you, it's 99% certain it's not clear to anybody else. So anything you want to make a statement about or ask? Yes, sir.
Yes, the scripture mentions that no one has seen God. As you mentioned at the beginning, the scripture testifies no one has seen God, and that's 100% true. And Jesus said, I am the image of the invisible God.
Yeah.
So, if we know that Jesus is the visible image of the invisible God, and also at the beginning in Genesis, the Bible testified that God created Adam in his own image. So Adam, before he took the forbidden fruit, he was the image of God too.
Yes, he was. Yes, and that's absolutely the question of the image of God, which is, again, please don't misunderstand me. This is not a view, it's not a view that Muslims at that point disagree with the Jewish and Christian view. They don't believe man is in the image of God. I don't believe you can have anything in the image of God. But Moses very clearly says that man is made in the image of God. That there is something about being human that is godlike. There's something about humans that are very unlike God, because the Bible will say, I'm not a man, God will say. I'm not a man that I should lie, and things like that. And man and God will often be contrasted in the Bible. But there's something about God chooses to make human beings with some likeness to God. And when Jesus comes and becomes one of us, that likeness is,
But Jesus is the spiritual Adam. The Bible mentioned also Jesus is the spiritual Adam.
Yes, that's an area that would be fun to go into, but with 10 minutes to go. The Bible will pick up almost every possible picture. Jesus is the temple. Jesus is the new Moses. Jesus is everything. Almost everything. Jesus is the sacrifice. Jesus is both he's the temple, he's the priest in the temple, he's the sacrificial victim that the priest kills. The whole Old Testament is all pointing to Jesus to help us get some handle on the enormity of this person who is so much more than a prophet. And the parallels between Adam, the destiny determining work of Adam and the destiny determining work of Jesus. And you either stand, according to the Bible, behind one of those two men. You're either in alignment with Adam, who says to God, I'll do it my way, thank you, or you stand behind Jesus, full of grace and blood and forgiveness and life. Now this is why do I believe this? See, God could make human beings quite happily and say you live and you die. That might be what happens to animals. I think Christians got to be very, very careful about saying that, particularly the children, no, your pet budgerigar will not go to heaven. You don't know that, so shut up. You shouldn't deny what the Bible doesn't deny. There may well be, and in some of the pictures of heaven there are animals anyhow. Lions and lambs and stuff. Who knows? It's better, frankly, if a person is not going to be happy in heaven without their pet budgerigar or whatever, I'm sure the budgerigar will be there. But, I just think better to say, just make sure you're there, and if the budgerigar's there, well, that'll be a happy reunion. It's always the best way. But don't. I learned that Sunday school teachers tell children that on The Simpsons. So it must be true. Now, friends, you've got a God-given brain, and God expects you to use your brain. And John 18, verse 37 is the last verse I'd like to draw to your attention, and it says this. Jesus is on trial before Pontius Pilate. And one of the things you notice when you read through the Gospels is that when Jesus is on trial, in a sense, the person who's really on trial is the person who's assessing Jesus. And I can say exactly the same for us. When you make your assessment of Jesus, what you may not realise is that you're actually, when you think you're assessing him, you're actually passing judgment on yourself. If you come to the conclusion that God's Son is not God's Son, it will not go well for you on the judgment day. If you come to the conclusion, I don't need the death of Jesus to be okay with God, if you think God's been a fool, as a dear old friend of mine said, who's now dead, died recently, said, if you get before God, if you arrive on the judgment day before God Almighty, and he says, how come you got here not forgiven by Jesus? And you say, I just didn't think it was all that important. This old guy John would say, God may well say to you, what do you think, I am a fool? You think I send my son to the earth to die? And it's not important? You think the only way I could see to make a just and perfect forgiveness was for my son to die in your place? And you think you could get here without that? What sort of a fool do you think God is who would do that? If there was any other way to get to heaven apart from the Son of God dying, you can be sure God would have done it. One of the things that's said of God is he's an economical God. He will do what needs to be done. But John 18, Jesus is on trial before Pontius Pilate. Pilate knows he's innocent, that he needs to kill him. for all sorts of political reasons. So he says, you are a king then, Pilate said. Jesus said, you say I'm a king. In fact, the reason I was born, the reason I came into the world is to. Isn't that lovely to know why you were born and why you came into the world? Jesus says, the reason I was born, the reason I came into the world is to testify to the truth. Right? And here's where you and I get very much involved. Jesus then says, everyone on the side of truth listens to me. Right? You want to know if you're really interested in the truth? According to Jesus, you'll show it because you listen to him. You make the time, you take the time to listen to him. Anyone who claims to be searching for the truth, Jesus says, but couldn't be bothered to listen to the one person who makes the sorts of claims that Jesus makes and has had the sort of impact that Jesus had, by far the largest religion in the world, by far the most influential man in history, and for good, and yet searching for truth, but not look at that. Jesus says, you're deceiving yourself. Everyone on the side of truth listens to me. So do make sure you've taken the time to listen to Jesus. And the great thing, how do you get to listen to Jesus? Well, very clear in John's Gospel. They're all great, but I'm particularly in love with John's Gospel at the moment. John's an eyewitness, and it's very clear he saw Jesus do these things, and the evidence historically is crystal clear that he was there. But you're not there. So John becomes like your eyes. It's a bit like something happening around that corner up the steps. And there's someone there who's looking, and for some reason you can't see it, and they're describing to you what they're seeing. You may want to see it, but you're not in the right place. But you're only one step removed. And John is writing down what he saw and writing down what he heard, so you can see and hear through his eyes. Most of what you know about your family's history, much of your life, is because other people saw you do it, heard you do it, thought it was cute and remembered it, and told you. Even your story about where you were born, you've got the faintest clue where you were born. Right? Other people told you. You didn't come out of your mother's womb and go, oh, Singapore, how interesting. I thought I'm nearly Hong Kong, but we just got here in time. But you just listen, other people tell you. So to listen to Jesus. Jesus, in the end, the question Jesus is constantly asking in different ways is said really clearly in Mark 8 when he says, who do you say that I am? Jesus asked that question, say, in Mark chapter 8. He doesn't walk up to people who know nothing about him and say, tell me, who do you think I am? Right? He lets them spend a couple of years with him, watching him, listening to him. And then he says, what's your opinion? And that is the question he and his Father want to know of you. What is your opinion of Jesus? Have you taken the time to listen to him? To read the closest sources we have, written by eyewitnesses, or Luke's Gospel, who tells us he wasn't an eyewitness, but he spoke to the eyewitness. He's very honest. He could have lied if he wanted to. He could have told, but he didn't. He said, I didn't see him. But I went around and talked to the eyewitnesses. I've written you a nice lovely report. To listen to Jesus and to let him speak to you. Now, we've got 2 minutes. Is there life after death?
Yes.
Nobody knows. If this guy's not a liar, we do know. Right? And it's wonderfully good news that there's a heaven that you can be forgiven by the grace of God and mercy, and there's also hell. To be absent from God and all that comes from him forever and ever. So life becomes both joyful and serious. It's actually what humans want, I think. A life is of substance and matters, but is also joyful.